Welcome to the Animation Industry Podcast. My name is Nicole. I am a voiceover artist. I'm a friend of Terry's, and I am doing the intro for this week's episode. I hope everybody's having a lovely day. I just ate a very yummy, very spicy samosa. It was quite greasy, it was quite full of veggies, and it is currently sitting in my belly. So hooray for that. This week's chat is with Luis Ribeiro, who is currently a partner and executive producer at LOBO, a creative design, 2D, 3D, and stop-motion animation studio based out of Sao Paulo and New York. Over the years, Luis has worked with brands like Coca-Cola, Disney, and 7-Up. And in his chat with Terry, he shares his journey from Brazil to the US and how he prioritized risky career moves to become the producer he is today. But first, this episode is sponsored by Snowlands, a brand new full-color graphic novel series for animal fantasy fans featuring snow leopards and Arctic wolves on a wild adventure through the snow-covered mountain range. Shifty lynxes, secret monkey tribes, singing palace cats, and a cult of sheep are just a few of what the heroes of Snowlands run into on their journey. This is the perfect read for those who love Aaron Hunter's Warriors or 2ET's Sutherland's Wings of Fire series. This premium hardcover book is only $19.99, and since it was created by Moore Moras, the guy behind the animation training website Bloop Animation, you can now get a $25 credit to any Bloop Animation course when you buy the book. So, if you thought about getting any of their courses, get this book first and get your $25 credit. It's kind of like getting a book for free. Hooray! We love it! To get this deal, go to www.bloopanimation.com/Terry. That's bloopanimation.com/TERRY. Now, without further ado, let us jump in to the episode. Bye!
Hi, Luis. How are you?
I'm good. The funny thing is I probably have the most common Brazilian name, the equivalent to Will Smith or John Smith, but in America, I'm unique.
I was just going to say, if you have the most common Brazilian name, then what makes you unique yourself? But when you go back to Brazil, how do you stand out?
Oh, I don't.
Okay, you just get grouped in.
There's like probably at least 100 Luises around me at any given point, so it's interesting.
Goodness. Hilarious. Yeah. Well, let me ask you this: why did you want to come on the podcast? Why did you want to share what you're going to share? Just curious.
I don't know if it is something that comes out of being old, and then you have this sort of desire to share anything that is part of your life that could contribute positively to someone else's. That's really the drive. There's not really any kind of vanity, perspective on that from me. Yeah. It's more like, is that something I can do that will help? Well, so basically, that's the drive.
I love that. But now I have a high expectation for you to impart wisdom into this chat. Actually, you were just telling me that you went and did a Q&A at the University of Texas in their film program as kind of like an alumni coming back. So you're already kind of on this path of sharing what you've learned. What was kind of maybe, an interesting question that somebody asked, or something that you felt was important to share with the students at that school coming into the industry from your experience?
I think what I thought was interesting was how technologically advanced they were in some of the questions they were asking me. When I was invited to speak, it was more like, the animation 101 that, comes very naturally. When they start asking about AR and VR and XR, I'm like, whoa. All relevant questions. Let me get back to you, because I have to talk to my head of technology guy, because, especially in this, field, everything changes on a weekly basis almost. So it was interesting to see how, that generation is so intrigued by that new approach, this new medium. And it still hasn't really kicked off, as we all can
Yeah.
tell. I mean, I don't have an Oculus. I don't know if you do. It's probably coming, and metaverse, whatever that's gonna turn out to be. I'm gonna wait for it. As a company, of course, we are, prepared for projects of that nature. But that was an interesting aspect for me to like, wow, look at these kids, way ahead of me. What am I doing here? Let me ask the questions.
Right. I felt like that when I went back to school. I was 30 and I was surrounded by 19, 20-year-olds who are A, way more talented than me, B, way more on social media than me, C, like way more technologically advanced than I thought I was.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I want to ask, I'm super interested in Lobo and kind of the work you do and how you stay ahead of the game and all that stuff. But let me ask you this, how was the experience going back to the school that you graduated from, and like remembering the mentality that you had when you were, a fresh student, not in the industry, and then having been in the industry for 25 plus years coming back? What was the biggest change in kind of like mentality that you've experienced being in the industry for so long versus, remembering when you weren't in it at all?
Well, that's the interesting thing about this, program. That's so they are RTF, radio, television, and film. When I went to school in Texas was the 90s. Radio was way more relevant than it is today. Print was much bigger than it is today, and of course, technology has sort of changed that dramatically. So when I was in school, there was like this, the world was so much, the possibilities were infinite in a way. And it felt, even though there's more mediums, there's more technology, there's more advanced, I feel like they were more boxed in into like, what I need to do has to be on Facebook, has to be on some social media in order to be relevant. And I thought that was an interesting difference in perspective from when I was a student and what these students were asking me, or what they thought was more important. So it was just different. The values, I think, of what people were aiming for was different than when I was in school, which were more like jobs, not fame.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, because like, everybody's on TikTok and Instagram, etc. And like, there's this big fame ego attached. Like, if I could just have more followers, etc. But that doesn't actually lead to paying the bills at the end of the day. How much does, you've been in the creative industry agency industry for a while. How much does social media influence, what you're creating? Like when you're creating ads for clients, are you also, packaging that ad for social media in snippets and TikTok and Facebook and Instagram and things like that, and Twitter?
Yes, not Twitter so much, but I think, as of maybe the last 5, 6, 7 years, our deliverables was always a 30-second commercial with a 15 lift. And then now there's not a single project that we do that doesn't have a social media deliverable. And there are a lot of projects that are only for social media. So yeah, it has changed dramatically. And 6 seconds, it's almost more important than the 30-second at this point. Also, audio might not be part of the equation as used to be, because you have to get the viewer's attention by what they see, and if they like, they might turn the audio on to hear as well. So that has been sort of a shift. I remember going to Cannes, my first Cannes Lions 13, 14 years ago, and this relationship viewer or consumer was very passive. Like, you sat on your TV and people will sell you toothpaste and you'll be like, oh, I want to buy that. And I think it seems like, the consumers are way more sophisticated now, and that the passive message of just listening and consuming has changed to a more interactive. And I think social media enables that because they can do their own research. They can read the reviews. They can see if that is the right one for them, or if there are other options that will be more, advantageous to them personally. So that shift in how the consumer buys a product, it's being reflected on what we do because we need to sort of follow that trend. We are in the creative field, but remember, we are animation studios, so the creativity and the idea usually comes from the agency, and we execute that vision.
So you
just to make that distinction.
So okay, so for Lobo specifically right now, you will get the creative vision from an agency, and then you will produce that vision. Interesting. Because
I was going to say that we're not creative.
Yeah.
But it just, I think it's always when I explain that to people, and of course, if you give me an idea, if an idea is given to me, to you, and to a third party, the three of us are going to come up 3 different ways of executing that idea. So that's part of the process. It's just, I always kind of like to point it out that we don't create content from scratch. We execute content ideas that were ideated into an advertising agency and then given to us to execute in a particular way.
So, okay, I have so many questions, but okay. So from like a business model risk perspective, does this mean you are kind of taking on less risk because the agency itself would bid on, so like say a brand like Coca-Cola, they have a whole bunch of creative agencies that'll like bid on things and whatnot, and then somebody will win it and then they'll pass it off to you. So you're kind of taking on less risk from that original request for proposal, or is it still kind of the same amount of risk? Are you still fighting against other production companies to take on this agency's execution? Like,
That's right.
What would be the decision not to have kind of the agency in-house as well?
Well, that's become more common now, agencies having their own in-house. So there's a couple of things that happen there. I think the creators at the agency like to have the freedom of working with people they admire. So if they saw a work that Lobo did and they wanted to do something like that, they don't want to work with their in-house production team because they don't think that they have the talent or the caliber to do something that they saw that Lobo did, for example. But also the way the business work, we have to and that comes from the brand mostly, but also from the agency. Every job, and I'm going to say 99% of every lead that comes to us, we have to triple bid. So it's Lobo and 2 more studios pitch to win that project. That is just standard in our industry. And that is, I think, even though it's a little bit unfair to studios because we don't get paid for the pitch, and pitches usually last a week for you to, you have to put animators, designers, storyboard artists, the whole team to create a 30, 40, 60-page treatment of that idea that the board, the creative board that came from the agency that has been approved by the brand, and then 2 other studios are going to do the same thing, and then the agency and the client will decide which studio is closer to their original vision. Or sometimes, very rarely, but it happens, someone goes completely off and it surprises everyone, and they're like, oh my God, we didn't think of that. That's a great approach. Let's go with that. Doesn't happen often, but it happens. Just to give you an example, was one studio was not, the brief, none of the idea had puppets as an execution in stop motion. And one studio went that way, completely off brief, and they won. And we're like, what? Do you guys want to pub? It's like, no, we didn't. And but we're so surprised by how they took a risk and went off brief again. Very rarely happens. Nobody takes that much risk because it is something you're doing, because it could be taken the wrong way. You know, it's a big risk. The client might be like, what the hell are you giving me? I mean, we don't want to do puppets. The client doesn't want to do puppets. But it was a risk that paid off. And once in a while, we will, not to that extent, but we might add something that is unexpected, which I think that's something just to segue about why LOBO for me. I love the fact that LOBO is a almost 30-year-old animation studio. I started in São Paulo in Brazil. I always feel like maybe because of culture, maybe because a range of reasons that I'm not even aware of, but there's something that makes us a little bit more unique or more unexpected in our approach to some briefs, which I love, because I'm a product of this market. I've been in the United States for 31 years. I went to school here, and then I started working in the business. So I never really worked with the Brazilian market, despite being Brazilian. And so I feel like my perspective in that sense is a little bit different than Brazilians who work in the Brazilian market, because they are more used to seeing that. For me, I think we add this sort of inherited value to the process only because there is an unexpectedness to it, maybe because we come from different cultures, or I don't know.
Yeah, that makes total sense to me. So let's chat a little bit more about you yourself, like where you came from, because you came from Brazil, and you journeyed to America, and what was the decision to come to the States and go to University of Texas for film? Like, what was young Luis thinking back when he was, I don't know, like 18 or whatever? Like, what was the dream you were pursuing?
Actually, I was an economics major in Rio, and I hated. Was late 80s, and Brazil was going through horrible inflation and economic chaos, and sort of a recent democracy, because it was a light dictatorship up to a few years back. So even, voting, it's something that was new to Brazilians for a long time. Obviously, as demonstrated by the last election, we still have a lot to learn. But it was one of those things like, I need to do something else. And I, at 19, it's, and I always talk to people sometimes at that age because they freak out, they don't know what they want to do, or who they are. I'm like, welcome to the club. And if you knew, great. But I'm going to guess that 90% of us don't. So you're on the 90%, not on the 10%. And I had this passion for film. I wanted to, it was the only thing that I could think of when I was trying to dig deeper into myself. What is that I could do in school that would excite me to turn into a career? And film was one of them. There was not really a film school in Brazil that I could go to. I think at the time there was one in São Paulo, for university called USP, Universidade de São Paulo, and it wasn't really something I wanted to explore. So I started applying to universities in the US. University of Texas was super welcoming and sent me a beautiful letter saying, we'd love to have you. And so, boom, I jumped on a plane and moved to Austin, which back then nobody knew what Austin was.
Yeah.
People like, you mean Dallas? I'm like, no, Austin. Never heard of it. I'm like, well, one day you will. And South by Southwest was $25. The ticket was only music back then. So it didn't really have a place in the map yet.
Yeah.
And it was wonderful. But that's how, everything started. So I moved in 91 to Austin, graduated, got my job at a company called Manhattan Transfer here in New York. The vice president of the company was having dinner at the restaurant that I was working at my last day, and they were at my last table. So it was a little bit like freakishly lucky. They gave me their card.
Wait, so you're just waiting the table and you're like, hi, I want to work for your company. And he was like, here you go. Come and work here. Done.
It was a little bit less easy, and definitely less interesting than that. It was really busy. It was South by Southwest was happening, the music festival.
Yeah.
They were about to get into films, so the Manhattan Transfer guys were in Austin for the South by Southwest because they were seeing if there's any opportunities for the post-production for feature films, independent feature films, so that they were there for business. And I didn't give a shit. It's my last table, my last day. So they're like, waving their hands. And I was like, you're going to have to wait. So when I turned around to give them my attention, the vice president of Manhattan was like, sorry, we New Yorkers, we're everything's in a hurry. I was like, oh, no problem. Sorry, it's just really busy. So I couldn't, come to your table sooner. And I'm moving to New York in a couple of months as soon as I graduated. And they're like, oh my God, great. Here's my card. Look for me. I'm like, I will.
Yeah, wow. What a random connection.
It was a total
You gave them some sass
connection.
and they gave you a job. That's great.
Right? I know.
So, you said you were part of the 90% that didn't really know what they were doing. Do you have a good sense of what you're doing now? Or do you still feel sometimes like, your path could lead anywhere, or like this is what you're doing now? Like you found your calling?
I think the business I love. What I do in terms of, what I do for Lobo and, what I've been doing for probably the last 10, 12 years, it has changed.
Yeah.
So I do feel like I feel very fortunate that speaking about percentages, I think it seems like 85% of people just have a job, but they don't like the job. I feel very lucky that I am maybe in that 15% that do what I love and being working in the industry that has embraced me and I embraced them in a way that it's been very fortunate because it is satisfying to do something you like and you have a passion for it. And some of the projects that we get involved with, I mean, it's advertising, so 95% is product. But once in a while we get a cause that makes all of us involved feel even better about what we do, being LGBT or something pro women or anything that is just like, yes, let's use the power of what we do to contribute, even if it's in a small way, to help change minds towards something positive. So
nice.
It's gratifying.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I love that. I'm just wondering, like you're kind of, executive producer and partner at a big company. You might say like you're at the top of your game pretty much, like, and you just said you love giving back to the community in ways through sharing, animation, what you do. Is there a goal for yourself personally in this career path that you've gone through that you would like to, expand on and you still haven't reached your full potential yet?
No, I don't. I mean, Thank you for saying that. It's very sweet of you. I just don't like. I never really been able to, in my entire life, be able to see more than a couple of years from now. Maybe it is a limitation of my personality. And even when I talk to accountants, whatever, they're like, you have to come up with your 10-year plan. I'm like, what? No. I can only think of 2 years ahead of me. So there's something that maybe is part of my, it's not a lack of ambition, but I'm not super like, oh, I need to do this. I need to be the president of, the Association of Commercial Independent. No, I just want to kind of do what I do better every day, and then just sort of, improve on what I already do. And Lobo is a big studio. We're the largest animation studio in Latin America in terms of size. With that comes enormous challenges in recruitment, in just especially post-pandemic with mental health. And so I think in terms of career, but also looking inside, there's so much work that we need to do with our teams and make sure that we are being good bosses and compassionate leaders to 250 plus people. So I think that I'm more looking at now and the near future as opposed to sort of way into 5 years from now. I don't know, especially the pandemic maybe made us realize that
you have no clue what's coming.
Clue what's coming.
I think it's interesting what you just said, and I love it. You're kind of living in the moment and doing your best as challenges arise or whatever. But like you started as a runner and now you're partner executive producer. You must have been doing something, even if you didn't project that you would be in this space now 10 years ago. What was it that was guiding you towards this and enabling you to kind of like go up the ranks from starting out as like the entry-level position to where you are now, like to be asked to be a partner and to like build the New York office of Lobo? That's huge. Like not everybody gets asked that. So like what was it about you that maybe there's you have some specific skills you've developed, or there's a way you approach challenges, or even when you're approaching decisions, like what is it about you that has enabled you to climb this whatever it is to get where you are?
I think, if we can summarize that answer into one word, would be flexibility. I wanted to be an editor. So my last year at University of Texas was all about Avid and editing and learning that aspect of post-production. I mean, the film school was interesting for me because right off the bat, I realized that being behind the camera and doing production was less attractive to me than being on the post side of things. I just fell in love with I remember in school, they said there are three movies, the writers, the directors, and the editors, which is true. You write a piece, somebody takes that piece and writes a script. That's already an interpretation of what was written. And then you shoot 30 hours, and then the editor has to get those 30 hours of film and editing 2 hours. So that's a third interpretation. So I always loved that aspect, that post was not just like, you're doing retouching at the final product. There was an artistic importance equal to, in a way, to the writer and to the director. So I fell in love with post-production in school.
Yeah.
Luckily, Manhattan Transit was a post-production house. So getting the job at a post-production for me was already a dream. Even though I was runner and serving coffee, entry level, I was so happy. I was in New York City. I made it. And it didn't matter that I was broke. It didn't matter that I I wasn't making money, that was tough, that I had to, take waiting table gigs on the weekend just to compensate my income so I could pay rent. All that it builds personality, and there's something about waiting tables too that people take for granted, but there's such a huge learning in how to read people when you do that job that I think I applied a lot of that as an
so
executive producer. Oh my God.
But you learned a lot
absolutely.
about people's character and how to read them just from waiting tables when you're answering their demands, and you like use those subtle cues in character to take advantage of situations in the workplace where you could squeeze your way into something else.
Absolutely.
Can you think of an example of like something that like not many people know of when versus like a waiter might know of people's behavior?
Well, I don't know if I can pinpoint anything, but it's just in general is like, when you are a waiter, you approach a table and that response, and people are talking and you have to interrupt them, and how to sort of navigate that without being rude, but at the same time,
how do I interrupt somebody without being rude? Like I just interrupted you now.
but you see, that's the thing, is it rude because you're trying to do a service for them, and so who's the rude? They who haven't stopped talking with me standing there to serve them. So there's a little give and take there. But I want to go back to your question so we don't digress. But so the Manhattan Transit thing was very unique, and about the thing that I said about flexibility is that editor is really what my goal was, and I knew that's the path that I wanted to go career-wise. As I start working in post-production and seeing how the editors were working there for a long time, and assistant editors were working there for 5 years, still doing assistant editing for the editors that were very well established. And back then, Manhattan Transfer did Sex and the City and The Wire, some really great HBO shows, and it was super, super exciting. But I realized, like, what if I'm an assistant editor for 5 years and I'm not good at it? What if I discover that I'm not good at this only after I spend so many years doing it? Then an opportunity happened in the design division of that company for a night shift to be an associate producer, one of those titles that doesn't mean anything, but it was like junior producer for CBS Sports. No, for the client was CBS Sports. A lot of March Madness, all those sports things, and the machines were very old that you would not even know what they are, but Chiron and Henry, and anyway, now I'm totally aging myself there. But I grabbed that opportunity so strongly, like, this is what I want to do. So I would do my runner job from 9 to 6. And then from 6 to midnight, I would help the delivery of these assets for CBS Sports.
So let me guess, like nobody really wanted this like night shift junior role. So it was like, because I'm just wondering, because wouldn't your employer or whoever be like, well, you already work full time for us, why are we going to give you this second role? Unless like nobody wanted it. Like
nobody wanted. I wanted. They didn't really need it, but they did. But they're like, it can be done. I think it had been done without anyone. But then if there was a problem, there's no one there to handle it. And because of the hours, I had to kind of start late because I was working late because I couldn't work 12 hours. I think labor laws, whatever, wouldn't allow it. But I knew that was my way into a position that require excellent organization skills.
So you were scared of putting all your eggs in one basket, essentially, because
Oh
you
no, yeah.
in editing.
Yes.
So you saw this as a way to kind of test the waters in another area. And if like, did you have a, like, say you didn't like it, were you like, well, I'm just going to quit, or I'm committing to this for the year, or?
Yeah, I was just gonna try it out. I mean, there was something I did not know about, but I knew it required attention and organization
Yeah.
and things that I've always felt that I knew I knew I could do, as opposed to editing, which I could do it. I just did not know if I was good at it. And
Yeah.
being organized and being prompt and being responsive and being, I think it's something that I naturally knew I had it on me. And I had a really lovely boss at the time, Israeli guy who, was in the military. Obviously, every Israeli goes to the military for 3 years, but there was something very, he had a way of working that I really enjoyed, how meticulous and precise he was with everything. That's why the department was such a success. And we hit it off, and that's how sort of the path of producing kind of started. And then somebody got pregnant or married, or somebody on the 5th floor for the visual effects division, and they said, "Hey, Luis, there's a position there," and I was shitting on my pants in fear that I wasn't ready for prime time. I was not ready to talk to clients. I was not ready to take on a project on my own. And my other boss at the time was like, "Well, either take it, or we might not need you for what you're doing now." And I'm like, "Oh shit!" So I have to
take it, or you're fired.
So I did, and fortunately, I was doing a good job with that. And then I'm going to say something to you that maybe it's kind of silly and not humbling or humbling or too humbling, but it's interesting that I did not think that I was ready for any of the positions that came to me up to recently. Because after 5 years being a producer for visual effects, my boss and I were looking for an executive producer for our office. And at that time, the company was called Riot, no longer Manhattan Transfer. They had been bought by a bigger company. And we are interviewing a bunch of executive producers, and she wasn't liking anyone. And I'm like, "Well, he's good." It's like, "Yeah, no, not a good fit, not a good fit." And then one of the flame artists, Randy, who's a dear friend to this day, said, "Why not Luis?" And she's like, "Oh my God, of course." I'm like, "Me? No, I've never been an EP. I cannot be an EP." It's like, "Well, you're already doing it." I'm like, so I don't know if that is a good thing or a bad thing. It wasn't a lack of confidence. It was more, I don't know. It's just like, no, I'm it's good. I need more experience. I need to work for a different company. That's the thing. From Manhattan Transfer to Company 3, which was part of the same company, it was 12 years. It was the beginning of my career. It was 12 years almost in the same company.
Wow.
So I never felt like I was I thought everybody else was better.
I mean, maybe that kind of humble attitude where you weren't really seeing your worth, rubbed off on people the right way. Like, "Oh, Luis, he's doing this amazing job. You're not pushing yourself. You're not, et cetera, et cetera." But even like, just scrolling back a bit, even how you talked about editing, where you had all these doubts internally, you weren't super feeling it. Like if you got off on editing and loved it and were researching on the side or whatever, you probably would have never gone this other route. You'd be an editor now, but something internal told you, "Hey, maybe this isn't for me." But just the way you've talked about organization and all this stuff since, like, it's clear that, you were kind of fit for this role. And now, however many years later, you're doing
it. Is more second nature for sure. It just, it doesn't worry me. It doesn't scare me. I don't doubt that aspect of my work. It just, that's set. So yeah, that was interesting. Anyway, so then just to finish the thing about the flexibility was that. So then then I became an executive producer of Riot, and then, the rest is history type of thing. But yeah.
Would you say,
Be
you mentioned
flexible.
flexibility. Would you say that, because like, for instance, if you had known you wanted to be a producer from the start, you likely would have just gone right into that. But when you weren't too sure of what you were wanting to do, that flexibility allowed you to try different things until you found what role you were best in, I guess. Does that make sense?
Total. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's precisely how it happened.
So, yeah. So, okay. You were asked to be a partner for Lobo. Like, tell me, why did they come to you and say like, hey, we know who you are. We think you're great in this role. We've heard of your amazing producing abilities. Like, why did they come to you and ask you to be a partner? That's amazing.
So that's sort of, again, a little bit unique to my the fact that I'm Brazilian and Lobo is a Brazilian studio.
Gotcha.
So that sort of ties in well. But it wasn't just obviously that, because we can have an amazing executive producer for Lobo New York. It doesn't have to be Brazilian. The language is not a problem. All my producers, everybody speaks English. Everybody's on the bilingual, and that is not really. I mean, it helps, but it's not a requirement, if you will. But so I was hired at Frame Store to be their executive producer here in New York, and I had a great time with them. Amazing company, and I've been working with in this field of visual effects, animation for a number of years, from the beginning of my career with Manhattan Transfer to this day. It was always been more a post visual effects animation. Now, when I say that, I have to be careful, because Lobo is not a post house. We are a production house. So we don't do post work. We do production of 2D, 3D, stop motion, as we already talked. So just to make that distinction, but the business is the same, and the market is the same. So when I was doing Frame Store, even before Frame Store, when I was at White House Post, which is also editorial, I was doing consultancy for a Brazilian government-funded initiative called Film Brazil. And Film Brazil with a Z, as it is spelled in the US. And what is Film Brazil? Film Brazil is an initiative, which is a really cool initiative from the Brazilian government. They have, I think, 80 initiatives to sell Brazilian leather, to Brazilian orange, to Brazilian whatever. And the Film Brazil was the division that was to help foster international business for Brazilian companies. I was in São Paulo, and sort of almost by accident, I met the person that was running this initiative, and she's like, oh my God, I need someone like you to help me in the American market, which you are familiar with. Again, never worked in the Brazilian market. I've been a product of the US market. And I did this consultancy for them for maybe 4 or 5 years. Lobo, São Paulo, was part of this association. So Film Brazil is an initiative, and they have 16, 20, 25 production companies, live action, animation, music. So Lobo is one of them. So I already knew Lobo from being part of this initiative. So they knew me and I knew them, but there was never really any interest in working together, because they were not opening an office in New York or in the US. And I was not really, I had a job, and the consultancy was almost a side gig that I did that did not conflict with the jobs that I had, being the White House when I started, being Frame Store when it ended. When Lobo came to me, so we already knew each other and I actually thought when the founders of Lobo asked for a Skype call back then, I thought it was to talk about the American market and what do they need. Was part of my consultancy, was always sort of help the Brazilian companies navigate the US market in advertising and post-production, production, and whatever the case may be. And to my surprise, they were like, no, we actually love you to open the office for us in New York. And I'm like,
great.
I pretended for a second that I'm like, let me think about it.
I'll get back to you.
I mean, inside I was yes, because I was a huge fan. I knew them before Film Brazil. I knew of Lobo for a number of years. I admired them. We have, combined, I don't know how many lions in our, award, trophies, shelf. And so there was like this admiration that I already had for them. And so it was not new, but it was an amazing opportunity. And so I spoke to Framestore, and then we had an agreement of a 3-month exit.
Yeah.
Because they had relocated me from New York, from LA. So I didn't want to, just a little over a year and a half that I was with them. And then I came to Lobo, and April 1st, Fool's Day, I opened Lobo New York in 2016. Yeah.
So you rented office space, you hired people here, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Wow. That's quite a fun and daunting thing.
It has been. But yeah, basically from scratch. My main business partner, the founder and creative director, Mateus, is like, obviously one of my best friends today. But yeah, we also luckily have an amazing work chemistry. We, he's on the creative side, I'm on the production side, and yeah, it really works, and it's been a dream job. I really, really, really happy with how things turn out and how successful we have been. Unfortunately, a pandemic was horrible, but it was an incredible opportunity for animation studios across the world to be more of a player in this business, because nobody could shoot live action. And so animation became a solution to this pandemic caused problem of not being able to go places and shoot film.
Yeah.
So
sure.
Yeah, it was great.
I'm wondering, has your job changed a lot? Like, what is 99% of your time spent doing now that you are kind of, you've opened the New York office, you were executive producer, or you're producing before, like, what is 99% of your job spent doing now? Is it coordinating with the Brazilian office? Is it finding, is it traditional producing things like budgeting and all that stuff?
Yeah, it is an element of both, inner workings of bidding and calendars and production in general, but it's also a sales. So being, and this is sort of a common thing in our business, that EPs are, sort of sales as well. So I'm the main point of contact for our sales reps across the globe. We have, somebody in Spain, somebody in Asia, somebody in UK, Midwest, West Coast, East Coast. So that kind of funnels through us here in New York for opportunities. So there is, I don't know if I can put it in percentages. Obviously, because the pandemic made animation so prominent and made us so busy, that if you asked me that question a few months ago, 100% is production. Yeah. Because we didn't need any kind of, we didn't need to go after work. The work was just coming nonstop. So now that things are normalized a little bit and live action is becoming normal again, and people are able to shoot and travel and so forth, then the sales aspect
Hmm.
comes back to be part of a huge part of my role as client relationships, and just the regular business of pursuing business.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm wondering, what's the biggest, as an executive producer versus a producer, what is the biggest difference in your role attached to that title?
Well, we have 18 projects going on now. If I was the producer on 3 of them, then I had 3 jobs to worry about.
Yeah.
As an executive producer, I have 18 jobs to worry about. So the distinction is volume and worry and amount of gray hair.
Worry.
Yeah.
It's in the job description. So you more oversee a bigger picture for the whole studio. And if you're a producer, you're more pinpointed on a specific job. So like your producers will come to you and be like, here's the work and stuff needed, and you'll look at all the resources and everything going on, and you'll be like, okay, you focus on this, you focus on that, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, that makes sense.
Basically, yeah.
I'm wondering, if somebody's listening and they're in a producer role, like how do you jump from, being really skilled at managing a few projects very in depth as a producer to seeing that bigger picture? Like, how do you convince, the company that you're ready for this greater role where you can take on more things but touch them less, I guess?
It's an interesting question because I have 2 producers with this goal.
And you're like, that's my job.
No. I believe me, I can do other things if people can take some of what I do.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because there's 2, I think, main characteristic of being an EP. One is the internal production aspect. So you have to be super organized. You have to be, and you're dealing with creative people. So there's, a tonality of how you speak to animators, illustrators, artists. So all that is a very key aspect of being a good producer is your relationship with the team. And, depending on the project, we have one going on right now. We have 125 people working on, and it's one producer. We just actually put a second producer now because we realized it's too much for one person. So there is that, internal, like managing, being organized, have everything in the right folders, and because sometimes, animation projects, they're lengthy. They take 2, 3, 4, 5 months, unlike some live action jobs where there's a lot of prepping, but you shoot, you edit, and you deliver. So there's a difference in how animation, just by the nature of it's the time that it takes to produce, that you have to maintain that information in a very organized manner with your client. This was approved, this was not approved, and then you have to have documentation and emails. Everything has to be in writing. I always tell them, like, think of yourselves as lawyers, and every email is evidence of either your guilt or your. Well, it is. Because,
Yeah.
it's not a bad relationship, but you have to protect the interests of the company and at the same time provide what the service that was awarded to you. The other aspect is more people that love the client relationship, to spread the message of the company, which out of all of my producers, only one person actually has more of that desire to be less on the nitty-gritty of production and be more on the sales and the image and help build that with different markets. So one of them came to me and was like, we haven't really touched on the countries like Dubai and Qatar, and should we pursue business there? I'm like, that's an interesting angle that you're trying to come in, because I would not even know where to begin. Of course, there is a market there and we should pursue it, but I think it was the only one we don't have representation with. So she's like, maybe that is one I can go. But I like that. I like that initiative. I like the fact that there is, she studied the globe to understand, like, where have we not worked with? Because we've been lucky. I mean, we work with Japan, we work with China, we work with Singapore, but we don't work with some of, other Asian countries that maybe we should be pursuing. So there was something to her proposal that I thought was interesting. So I think that depends on, where you fit and what do you want to do personally for your life.
So let me sum it up. So say I'm a producer right now and I'm looking to get to the next stage of producing as an executive producer. You would look for somebody who's super organized with their projects, has great communication and people skills with their teams, and also somebody who's looking to grow the business specifically and be more on, the sales and customer facing side, which makes a lot of sense because, like, if your mentality is to do a great job on the projects you're given, that's a totally different mindset than growing the business and finding new opportunities to bring in. So that's interesting to me. So it's like those are the kind of the three qualities that would kind of get somebody to the next level. And the growth thing makes 100% sense to me because you want somebody at the top of the business to be continuously growing.
And Terry, in a way, they kind of come almost naturally as well. It's not, you don't really have to force it because the producer is already dealing with the client. I'm not the middleman in a way. I mean, I'm there, especially if there are problems or issues or crises, the EP has to step in and solve. But I think that, if you have the organizational skills, if you're good at that portion of the job, and you are good dealing with the client, tone, professionalism, confidence, all that with your 3 projects, to translate that to 18, it's not that hard if you have, all the other skills, in place and you're already doing it. So it's almost like you don't have to develop that. I think that kind of develops by itself.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. So maybe what you're saying is like, I don't know if I can say this correctly, but do some internal reflection and see what you're naturally good at and try to find a fit in a role that you are, that those skills are naturally needed. So like, instead of, say I'm in a production role and I want to get to the executive producer because of money or prestige, like maybe that's not the right goal for me because maybe my skills are more naturally fitted to actually be an editor, for instance. And I'm just putting that off because, my internal and external goals are not super aligned. So I guess what you're saying is lean into your natural talents and work through a role that fits them.
I guess.
I mean, I kind of know what that's like. I was head of SEO at my software company and was doing great, but to get ahead, I had to keep taking courses and getting mentorship and talking to people. And whereas like animation was just like I was doing it on the side, and it was going places without even me putting that much effort into it. So I had this internal reflection where I said to myself, like, how do people externally see me? What are my natural skills? And then I made the switch, and hopefully it's going okay.
But yeah, I think that's probably even applicable to several careers, not just this one, but I remember, and I'm sure we need to probably wrap this
for sure. Yeah. I don't want to keep you all day. So
no, but it was interesting. Just a side note, because at one point in between jobs, I hired a career coach. Talking to a dear friend, and I said, I'm a little bit feeling like I don't know where I fit in the current business. I was already executive producer. I was vice president of Company 3, a color grading company in LA. Our biggest account was Apple. It felt really great, but I wasn't I there was something missing that I did not know what it was. So the career coach gave me one exercise, which was to write down 5 careers that I would like to do. And geography, irrelevant. Money, irrelevant. Look inside you and find 5 things you want to do.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? I came out with 2. And none of them are related to what I do now. No, but the reason I'm pointing that out because it's very interesting, and it was such an incredible exercise. And I had a weekly call with her because she was actually in New York and I was living in LA at the time. And it was a phone call, and 1 hour a week. And she gave me a week to come up with that. I couldn't come up with any. And then she gave me another week. It was like, you need to look into this. And it was just such a weird thing because we've been talking about looking inside and understanding who you are. And then when I needed to come up with something that wasn't related to money or geography or anything, it was very hard for me. And I came up with 2 things that I thought, like, if you're talking about being happy, this is the kind of things that I would do. She's like, great, we're not doing that. There's no future on that. So let's go back to this. But I just thought it was an excellent exercise to dig deeper into, and maybe a little life check too, like, okay, these are ideal things I like to do, but I also need to make a living. I need to, and it wasn't even about making money, but just having a life, be able to have a job that would enable you to have a normal, middle-class life, whatever your goal is. But so just, I thought it was an interesting thing that I forgot about that career coach thing and how hard it is to understand oneself.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I don't think we do that enough. You go through life and you go through the processes and you get into a system. And there's even a system in animation, it just guides you to what it needs. And it's almost hard to stop and, reflect and say, like, what is it that I want and need out of what I'm doing with my life? You only got one chance. But no, I did a similar reflection, which ended up where I am now. So I love that you brought that up. But not to take all your time, I'm just wondering, is there anything that you wanted to share, maybe as we're wrapping up, and for somebody listening who's enjoyed hearing about your career and how you've gotten to where you are and what you're doing?
Actually, I just want to throw right back at you to say that I think it's amazing what you are doing, because it doesn't feel you're doing it for yourself. It feels like you really gather information and spreading that information for others to gain something out of it. So kudos to you.
Well,
and I'm just happy that I can be of service to share a little bit. And then if that helps someone, then that's the goal. But I think it's awesome what you are doing. So
well, thank you so much. I mean, I feel a little bit emotional hearing that, because it really hits a chord with what I'm trying to do. Like as we're talking, I'm interested in what you're saying, but I'm also trying to think of, if somebody's listening, and because every conversation I have is, your journey is so important, and you've gotten to a place based on your experience, and what you said about, waiting tables, I think is super interesting. So I'm trying to also think about somebody else listening to this who wants to have something similar to you, or they're questioning, where they want to go. So yeah, I'm really happy you reflected that back at me. Thank you.
Of course. I think that's what this is all about. So I love that. I love it. You can invite me anytime.
Of course. Well, Luis, thank you so much for jumping on the call and joining the chat. It's been a pleasure hearing about your journey and chatting with you.
Likewise, Terry. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, and if you're listening to this conversation, you want to check out Lobo's work or Luis and follow him or get in touch with him, you can do so by shooting him an email, which is luis@lobo.cx, or going to just Lobo's website, which is lobo.cx, and I'll include a link to that in the description of this chat. And thank you so much for listening, and that's all for now. Okay, bye.
The music for this podcast was composed by Will Farmer and the graphics by Daniel Abensauer. I encourage you to look them up if you enjoyed their work.